My name is Zach Harper. I'm 43, born and raised in South Carolina. Grew up around saltwater and outboard motors. These days, I own a small boat repair shop just off the coast. It's nothing glamorous, but it's mine. There's a kind of satisfaction in working with your hands, bringing something busted back to life. You know where you stand with boats. People, though, that's a whole different story. For almost 15 years, my wife Amber's been part of my life. When we first met, she was this whirlwind of energy. Always had some project going on, always full of big ideas. She'd stop by the shop in ripped jeans and scuffed boots, hair in a messy braid, talking my ear off about the things she wanted to build. She wasn't afraid of grease under her nails or sweat on her brow. That's the Amber I fell for. The kind of woman who didn't care about appearances, only about doing the damn thing right. But people change. Or maybe they evolve. Maybe what you see in the beginning is only a small part of who they really are, and time just does the slow work of revealing the rest. These days, Amber's life is a world apart from mine. Pencil skirts and silk blouses replace those ripped jeans. Corporate luncheons, networking events, speaking engagements, she became someone with a LinkedIn profile that made my head spin. Always busy, always in demand. It was like watching someone climb a ladder you didn't even know existed. I told myself it was a good thing. Ambition isn't a sin. I was proud of her hustle, proud she could walk into a room full of suits and own it. But somewhere along the way a distance grew. Subtle at first. Missed dinners. Late nights. It's just a project deadline, Zach. You know how it is. Yeah. I knew how boats worked. People, not so much. Then came that Friday. She called me mid-afternoon, voice bright and chipper, asking if I could pick her up from a conference center in Charleston. Her car was in the shop. Funny, I hadn't heard anything about car trouble, but I didn't think much of it. You help your spouse. That's what marriage is, right? I wrapped up early at the shop, wiped the grease from my hands, and hit the road. Traffic on I-26 was the usual crawl, giving me plenty of time to think. Lately, that wasn't always a good thing. When I pulled up near the conference center, the sidewalks were buzzing with people in business casuals and ID badges. The kind of scene that always made me feel like an outsider. I parked and spotted her right away. Amber was standing by the glass facade, talking to a man I didn't recognize. Tall, sharp suit, clean-shaven, with that self-assured posture some men wear like cologne. He wasn't touching her in an obvious way, no hand-holding, no embraces, but his hand rested casually on her lower back. That placement wasn't an accident. It was too familiar. The kind of touch that says this isn't our first time standing this close. She was laughing at something he said. Not forced, not polite. Genuinely entertained. Her body leaned toward him slightly, her hand resting on her hip in that way she used to do when we were still dating. It hit me harder than I'd expected. I've always believed you can tell more about a relationship by what isn't said. Words lie. Body language doesn't. In that moment, their bodies were having a conversation I wasn't invited to. They didn't notice me right away. I stood there, watching from across the street, feeling something in my gut twist. It wasn't quite jealousy. It was recognition. Recognition that this was a scene that didn't include me, didn't even consider me. When Amber finally spotted me, it was like a switch flipped. Her posture straightened, she took a half step back from him, and that smile, the real one, vanished. She waved me over with a brightness that felt rehearsed. Zach, there you are, she said, breezing toward me as if nothing was off. The man stayed where he was, giving me a polite nod but nothing more. Amber hooked her arm through mine, all smiles. Thanks for coming to get me. You're a lifesaver. On the drive home, the conversation was light. Too light. She told me about panel discussions, keynote speakers, some bigwig from Atlanta giving a talk on leadership. Her words were smooth, practiced. I knew Amber well enough to catch when she was performing. So, who was the guy? I asked casually, keeping my eyes on the road. She blinked, a heartbeat of hesitation. Oh, just a work connection. One of the sponsors. You know how it is. Lots of networking, shaking hands, making nice. Part of the job. Friendly guy, I said. She laughed, but there was a tightness to it. That's how business gets done, Zach. A little charm, a little schmoozing. Don't read into it. But I already had. The way she said it, it wasn't defensive. It was dismissive. Like she'd anticipated the question. Like this wasn't the first time she'd rehearsed that answer. She changed the subject after that. Asked me about work, about the boats in the shop, about a neighbor's kid looking for a summer job. But the whole ride home, her hand never once reached for mine on the center console. It used to be a habit of hers, a small thing, but noticeable now by its absence. Later that evening, after she went upstairs to shower, I sat alone in the kitchen. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I stared at my coffee mug, the one she bought me years ago with Captain printed on it in bold letters. It felt like a joke now. I wasn't angry. Not yet. What I felt was worse. It was doubt. I told myself maybe I was overthinking. Maybe it was just business. Maybe that man's hand on her back was nothing more than a cultural difference in the corporate world. But deep down, I knew better. There's a difference between a handshake and a claim, between casual and an asterisk mate. And what I saw wasn't casual. That night, as Amber curled up beside me in bed, scrolling through her phone with that same detached focus she used to give to spreadsheets, something inside me shifted. A small, quiet realization. I was no longer the first person she shared her day with. I was the ride home. The reliable man with the pickup truck who'd always show up when called. I lay awake longer than usual, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft tap of her phone screen. The distance between us was only a few inches on that mattress, but it might as well have been miles. That was the first sign. The first crack in the glass. And it was only the beginning. A week passed after that afternoon in Charleston, but the image of Amber with that man clung to me like barnacles on a hull. No matter how much I tried to scrape it off, it stayed. Subtle but there. Eating away in the quiet moments. I didn't bring it up again. Partly because I wanted to believe her explanation. Mostly because I was afraid of what might happen if I kept pulling at that thread. But then came the next crack. It was a Tuesday. Not much going on at the shop, just me, Earl, and a 20-foot Sea Ray with a busted transom. Around 3 in the afternoon, a storm rolled in faster than the forecast had promised. Earl decided to call it a day, said something about his knees knowing more than the weatherman. I wasn't far behind him. As I drove home, windshield wipers working overtime, I noticed Amber's car in the driveway. That surprised me. She'd mentioned a late meeting. One of those board alignment strategy things that sounded made up to me, but who was I to question corporate lingo? But there it was. Her sleek black SUV sitting in our driveway like a secret she hadn't planned to reveal just yet. The house was quiet. Too quiet. No TV, no music, not even the low hum of her usual conference calls. The air felt staged. Like walking into a room just after someone had been arguing and now pretended they weren't. I called her name. No answer. Something nudged me then. Call it gut instinct, or maybe just the paranoia I'd been swallowing since Charleston. I didn't head straight to the living room like usual. Instead, I circled around the side of the house, boots squelching in the wet grass. Through the kitchen window, I spotted her. She was sitting at the table, phone propped up on a small stand. Taking selfies. But this wasn't the casual, goofy Amber I knew, the one who'd make faces or give me bunny ears if I happened to walk by. This was different. She adjusted her hair, running her fingers through it with deliberate slowness. Tilted her chin just so. Shifted her shoulders to emphasize curves in ways I hadn't seen her bother with in years. Snap. Snap. Pouting. Smiling. Biting her lip. And not once did she check to see if anyone was watching. My stomach knotted. I stood there longer than I should have, watching this version of my wife I barely recognized. The same woman who used to roll her eyes at influencers, now posing like one. But this wasn't for her company's Instagram. I knew it. She knew it. Finally, I entered the house. Purposefully loud, making sure the door banged just enough to announce my arrival. Amber greeted me from the kitchen a little too quickly. Hey, you're home early. Bad weather. Yeah, Earl said his knees are smarter than the weatherman, I replied, hanging up my soaked jacket. She laughed politely. A safe, controlled sound. Then, like she'd rehearsed it, she added, just grabbing some sh*TS for the company's social media. We're trying to humanize the brand, you know? Humanize the brand. She said it with such ease, like she'd expected the question before I even opened my mouth. Sure, I said, pretending to buy it. Gotta stay on top of that engagement. Exactly, she chirped, slipping her phone into her back pocket. You get it. But I didn't get it. Not for a second. That night, long after Amber had retreated upstairs with her tablet and wireless headphones, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the dark screen of the TV. It wasn't the selfies themselves that bothered me. It was the secrecy. The way she moved, the way she'd explained herself too smoothly, too fast. Like the lie was already loaded and ready to fire. I thought about that man in Charleston. His hand. Her laugh. The way she'd minimized it all with a corporate smokescreen. And now this. It was a pattern. A language she thought I couldn't read. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger's loud and wild. What I felt was quieter, more corrosive. Doubt doesn't shout. It whispers. It plants seeds. And those seeds were starting to sprout. Over the next few days, Amber's schedule became increasingly fluid. Meetings ran late. Calls came in after dinner. She'd step outside to take this real quick, phone pressed to her ear, pacing with her free hand tucked into the crook of her elbow. Her laptop, once left open on the dining table without a second thought, was now guarded like a vault. Screen tilted away. Notifications silenced. Browser history wiped clean. And when she smiled, it was only from the cheeks up. Her eyes never followed. I started to notice other things too. Her perfume changed. Subtle but there. No longer the vanilla amber scent I used to bury my face into. This was sharper, more exotic. Not her usual. And her wardrobe shifted in ways I couldn't ignore. Clothes she once saved for anniversaries now made casual appearances on regular days. New shoes appeared. A handbag that definitely hadn't come from any of the stores she normally shopped at. Corporate gift, she said when I asked. Of course. Everything was corporate now. But the biggest shift wasn't in what she wore or how she smelled. It was in how she looked at me. Or rather, how she didn't. Conversations became surface level. Logistics. Schedules. Bills. But nothing beneath that. Nothing real. I could have been a roommate for all it mattered. She no longer asked about the shop, about the boats, about the small triumphs and frustrations of my day. And when I offered something up, she nodded absently, scrolling through her phone, murmuring, "That's great, babe," without lifting her eyes. It was like talking to an echo. But still, I didn't confront her. Why? Because confrontation changes things. Once you cross that line, there's no going back to the safe ignorance of before. As long as I kept my mouth shut, there was still the illusion. Still a shadow of us left standing. But illusions don't hold up under scrutiny. And Amber was giving me less and less to hold onto. One night, after she'd gone to bed early claiming a migraine, I stayed up in the living room, flipping through channels I wasn't really watching. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a message from Earl. "Hey, saw Amber downtown earlier. Thought she was out of town this week." I stared at the screen, my pulse thrumming in my ears. She told me she was traveling for a 3-day client summit. Gave me the whole rundown, agendas, hotel info, the works. And yet, here she was, in town. I typed back. "You sure it was her?" Earl replied with a photo. Not staged. Not posed. Just a quick snap from a distance. Amber walking beside the same man from Charleston. No hand on her back this time, but the proximity spoke for itself. They looked comfortable. Familiar. And she'd lied. Plain and simple. The crack from Charleston had widened. That night, lying in bed beside her, I stared at the ceiling while she scrolled through her phone, oblivious. The woman I loved was right there beside me. And yet, she was miles away. They say the truth has a funny way of showing up when you least want it. For me, it came wrapped in something so mundane, I almost laughed at how fitting it was. A week after Earl's photo, after the excuses and carefully timed business trips, Amber had a presentation in Atlanta. Another client summit, another reason to be away. By now, I'd stopped questioning the details. She gave them so freely, so rehearsed, it was almost insulting. But I listened, nodded in all the right places. Playing the fool had its advantages. The morning she left, she kissed me on the cheek. Not the lips. A kiss meant for strangers or distant relatives. Her luggage rolled behind her as she breezed out the door, already on speakerphone with Marianne from the office. Probably code for whoever it really was. I stayed behind, watching her car disappear down the road. The house felt quieter than usual. Not empty, but hollow. Like it was holding its breath, waiting for something inevitable. 2 days later, it happened. I was at the shop, closing up for the day, when I remembered she'd left her sunglasses in the trunk of her SUV. She'd mentioned them during breakfast in that offhand way people do when they're hoping you'll take the hint. "Remind me to grab those when I get back, will you, babe?" Sure. Except now, I wasn't sure I wanted to remind her of anything. Still, out of habit more than goodwill, I decided to get them. Her SUV was parked at the side of the house, the same place it always was when she was away. She'd left it there, claiming she took an Uber to the airport this time. "Parking fees are murder downtown," she'd said with a light laugh. I popped the trunk. The sunglasses were there, right where she said. But so was her business card holder. That caught me off guard. Amber never went anywhere without it. It was her little badge of importance, always tucked into her purse. The leather was scuffed at the edges from years of use. Something compelled me to pick it up. Not to snoop, at least not at first. More like testing a theory. Tucked behind the stack of neatly arranged cards was a hotel envelope. Embossed with gold lettering, Grand Madison, Atlanta. Elegant. Discreet. Inside was a receipt. 1 room, 2 guests. 2-room service charges. Late checkout. The date matched her current trip. My throat went dry as I scanned the itemized list. Champagne. Breakfast for two. A spot charge that certainly wasn't part of any client summit. She hadn't even tried to hide it. For a moment, I just stood there, fingers curling around that envelope, feeling the weight of every lie she'd fed me. Every carefully constructed alibi crumbled under that slip of paper. But the universe wasn't done yet. Under the spare tire cover wedged in the emergency kit was something else. A second SIM card. One of those pay-as-you-go types. The kind you get when you don't want anyone knowing who you're really calling. My hands were steady as I slid it into my old work phone. The screen lit up. No lock code. The messages were there. Hundreds of them. I didn't need to scroll far to see what they contained. Photos. In asterisk mate candid. Her with him. Dinners, hotel rooms, little moments that should have been ours but weren't. Conversations that dripped with familiarity, inside jokes, pet names. Bookings for weekends that never included me. There was no room left for doubt. No way to spin this into corporate networking or client relationships. She hadn't just crossed a line. She'd bulldozed through it and built a new life on the other side. I wasn't angry. Not in the explosive, throw something kind of way. What I felt was colder. A clarity so sharp it cut through the fog I'd been living in for months. Amber hadn't just cheated. She'd rewritten our marriage without me. I sat down on the tailgate of the SUV, the wind tugging at my shirt, and let the weight of it all settle. Every late meeting. Every business trip. Every half-hearted smile across the dinner table. It all made perfect sense now. When I finally stood up, it wasn't with the intention to confront her. That moment would come, sure. But it wouldn't be in anger. It wouldn't be in a shout-fueled, finger-pointing spectacle. That wasn't me. No, I'd confront her the same way she'd betrayed me. Quietly. Precisely. With the same cold calculation. That night, alone in the kitchen, I spread out the evidence on the table like a forensic scene. The hotel receipt. The second SIM card, now full of its damning messages. The photos. A timeline of betrayal in high definition. I could almost hear her voice in my head, trying to spin it. It's not what it looks like. But this time, there was no room for deflection. The next morning, Amber returned. She walked in with the same bright smile, dropping her keys in the bowl by the door, shrugging off her coat. If she noticed the shift in the air, she didn't show it. Hey, babe, she said, leaning in for that same distant kiss. Trip went great. Long, though. Exhausted. I nodded. Yeah? Good to hear. She breezed past me into the kitchen, talking about some new contract, the usual jargon. It was like watching a performance, seeing her hit the marks, deliver the lines. But I wasn't buying tickets anymore. I didn't confront her that day. Or the next. Instead, I watched. Every word she said became another piece of the puzzle I was no longer trying to solve. I already knew the picture. Now, I was just watching how long she'd keep pretending it wasn't obvious. The illusion was shattered. I wasn't looking for confessions. I was preparing for consequences. And she didn't even see it coming. You'd think after discovering what I did, the hardest part would be confronting Amber. Telling her I knew. Watching her scramble for excuses. But no. The hardest part was doing nothing. Sitting in the same kitchen where we used to laugh over burnt toast, watching her pour coffee like nothing had happened. Hearing her hum to herself while scrambling eggs, still wearing my old flannel shirt like it meant something. It was a surreal kind of torture, living beside someone who'd already left you in every way but physically. The mornings were the worst. Amber had always been a morning person. Up before sunrise, doing yoga in the den, sipping green tea while scrolling through her tablet. She called it her power hour. These days, that power wasn't for me. It wasn't for us. It was for the life she was building somewhere else. I stopped joining her. I'd sit by the window with my own coffee, staring at the empty road outside while she moved through her rituals, oblivious. The silence between us wasn't angry. It was worse than that. It was indifferent. That's when I realized something that hit harder than her betrayal. I had become invisible. She didn't notice when I stopped asking about her meetings. She didn't flinch when I let the conversation die at dinner. Her world kept spinning, and I was no longer part of its gravity. At first, I thought she was being careful. That maybe she was avoiding the topic because of guilt. But over time, it became clear she wasn't avoiding me out of shame. She simply didn't see me anymore. That clarity was like stepping into cold water. Shocking, but awakening. I wasn't the man she sent flirty texts to between meetings. I wasn't the person she confided in about her day. That role belonged to someone else now. To the man with his hand on her back. To the man who knew about her headaches before I did. Our marriage had become a well-rehearsed play where I was still showing up for lines she no longer cared to hear. And yet I stayed. Not out of denial. Not even out of hope. I stayed because leaving without a plan felt like giving her the last word. like stepping off a sinking ship without grabbing my tools first. So I started reclaiming myself in small, quiet ways. It began with the photo albums. The ones she curated with perfectly captioned memories, Zach and Amber's best summer, Harper Adventures 2017. They used to sit proudly on our living room shelves. One by one, I boxed them up and moved them to the attic. Not out of spite, out of necessity. Then it was my favorite jacket, the one she always said was too scruffy for dinner out. That jacket found its way back to my workshop, draped over the back of my office chair where it belonged. Digital files came next. Bank accounts, insurance policies, passwords all quietly restructured. Separate. Secure. Amber didn't notice. She was too busy planning her next trip. Another client summit in Nashville. Another excuse. There was a strange kind of peace in the routine of it. Each quiet step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself she'd overlooked. Like sanding down an old boat layer by layer until you reached the raw wood beneath. I didn't stop her from going through the motions of our life. Let her post her curated images, let her tell her followers about work-life balance while our marriage rotted from the inside out. It wasn't anger that drove me. It was self-respect. Living with Amber after knowing the truth wasn't some grand act of martyrdom. It was observation. A study in how someone could be so physically present and yet so completely detached. At night, we shared the same bed, but the space between us was an ocean. She'd roll over, mumble goodnight, babe, out of habit, and drift into sleep without noticing that I was already long gone in my mind. And me? I'd lie there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how betrayal doesn't always come crashing in like a storm. Sometimes it seeps in like rising damp, slow and insidious, until one day you realize the foundation's rotten. But the most painful part wasn't the infidelity. It was the indifference. The slow erosion of being seen, heard, wanted. That's what betrayal looks like when it's quiet. One morning, maybe 3 weeks after the Atlanta summit, I found myself watching her through the kitchen doorway. She was on a video call, laughing that same practiced laugh, nodding in rhythm with someone I couldn't see. Her face was lit by the glow of the screen, eyes bright, shoulders relaxed. That version of Amber was alive. Engaged. Present. It wasn't for me. That was the moment I knew. Not in a dramatic, heart-pounding revelation. No, this was simpler. I wasn't fighting for her anymore. I was fighting for me. I had spent months, maybe longer, trying to make sense of her distance. Trying to bridge the gap with patience, with understanding. But bridges only work when both sides are building toward each other. Amber had stopped building a long time ago. And for the first time, I wasn't angry. I was free. That realization didn't come with fireworks or slamming doors. It came quietly, like slipping off a heavy coat you didn't realize was weighing you down. That morning, I left the house without telling her where I was going. Drove to the river. Sat on the dock with a cup of gas station coffee. Watched the water move in slow, deliberate currents. The river didn't care about lies. It didn't care about curated images or secret messages. It just kept moving forward. And so would I. By the time I got back, Amber was already gone. Off to another meeting. Another version of her life. She didn't notice my absence. She didn't ask. And I didn't offer. That's when I understood I wasn't invisible to myself. Not anymore. After that morning by the river, something in me shifted for good. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel bitter. What I felt was cleaner. Like a knot in my chest had finally loosened. I wasn't going to win her back. I wasn't going to beg for attention from someone who had already chosen to look past me. No. What I was going to do was simple. I was going to leave with my dignity intact. But not yet. Amber had spent months, maybe years, building her secret life in the shadows of ours. Careful. Calculated. Always 2 steps ahead. So if I was going to walk away from this marriage, it wouldn't be with an impulsive explosion. It would be with precision. For once, I wasn't reacting. I was planning. It started quietly. I opened a separate bank account. At first, just a small transfer. Nothing she'd notice. The boat shop wasn't a gold mine, but it was steady. Every new job that came in, every invoice paid, funneled into that account. Out of sight. Out of reach. Next, I contacted an attorney. Not one of the high-profile firms Amber liked to name-drop at dinner parties. No, this was a small office in the next county over. Discreet. Efficient. A man named Russell who specialized in situations like mine, straightforward divorces with complicated emotional layers. I'm not looking to burn the house down, I told him. I just want to be free of it. Russell nodded, sliding a legal pad across the desk. Let's start with the basics. And so we did. Over the next few weeks, while Amber busied herself with her curated image, I quietly dismantled our shared life. Shared passwords? Changed. Joint subscriptions? Cancelled. Utilities? Shifted under my name alone. The house, technically still in both our names, was more complicated. But the paperwork was being drawn up. A fair split. Nothing messy. Amber could have her corporate life, her clean reputation. All I wanted was my peace. At home, I moved with deliberate caution. My belongings began migrating to the workshop. First, my tools. Then personal files. Old photos. Keepsakes she never bothered to look at anymore. Little by little, I reclaimed my space. The funny thing was, she didn't even notice. The jacket she used to hate seeing draped over the kitchen chair? Gone. My favorite coffee mug, the one that said Boat Whisperer? Moved to the shop. The shelf where we kept our wedding album stayed empty for a full week after I boxed it up. She never asked where it went. That was the real sign more than anything else. Not the cheating. Not the lies. The indifference. Amber had made our marriage an accessory to her public image. Something to reference when it suited her. My husband this, my husband that in passing conversation. But the man she spoke of didn't exist anymore. Maybe he never did. It was liberating in a way. The less she saw me, the more clearly I saw myself. For the first time in years, I started working on boats not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Old clients became old friends again. I'd stay late at the shop, not out of avoidance, but because it was mine. A space untouched by her curated narrative. I even started running again. Nothing serious. Just laps around the backfield. Stretching muscles that had forgotten what motion felt like. Every step was a reminder, this body, this mind, this life, it's still mine. Amber didn't notice the changes. Or maybe she noticed, but didn't care. She was too busy planning another trip. This time to Miami. Another summit. Another networking opportunity. When she told me, she didn't even pause to see my reaction. Just rattled off dates and itineraries like I was her secretary. I nodded. Took note. Miami would be the final act. That week, Russell finalized the paperwork. Clean, comprehensive. There would be no ugly fights. Just facts. I prepared a small envelope. Inside, a neatly organized stack of proof. Not every photo. Not every message. Just enough. Enough to cut through the noise. The timing was important. Amber was gearing up for a big announcement. A new promotion. Senior partner. The pinnacle of her carefully constructed corporate image. While she rehearsed speeches and curated her next public appearance, I rehearsed my own quiet exit. No shouting matches. No slamming doors. Just precision. On the morning of her flight to Miami, we had breakfast like usual. She scrolled through her tablet, discussing quarterly reports to no one in particular. I sipped my coffee, already packed and ready. Before she left, she kissed me on the cheek. The same mechanical gesture. You're quiet today, she said, not really looking. Just thinking, I replied. About what? I smiled, finishing my coffee. About what comes next. She didn't press. She was already out the door. That day, I loaded my truck with the last of my things. The essentials. The non-essentials could stay. They'd become background props in a life I was no longer interested in playing. I dropped by her office while she was still basking in the spotlight in Miami. The receptionist greeted me like always. Polite. Oblivious. I just need to drop something off for Amber, I said, holding up the envelope. Of course, Mr. Harper. Her office was pristine. Sterile. Not a trace of the woman who used to smell like motor oil and ocean air. Only glass, steel, and curated plants. I placed the envelope on her desk. No note. No dramatics. Just the truth neatly packaged. And then I left. By the time she read it, I'd be long gone. That evening, as she stood on stage accepting applause, her parallel life intact, I was already settled elsewhere. A modest place. Small, but mine. No shared closets. No performative breakfasts. No curated lies. The silence was no longer suffocating. It was peaceful. For months, I'd lived beside someone who didn't see me. Now, I was choosing not to see her. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't spite. It was freedom.